Right into it tonight, or get your phones or your iPads or your Androids and go ahead and rip open Ephesians chapter 4. But this has been one of those teachings that build, and so if you're coming in on the last week, you don't know what I'm talking about, you weren't here for any of the first couple of weeks of this, this is something that has built every single week, and in a specific order. I wanted to make sure we covered it, and so you really need to go back and listen to the first messages. Tonight it will help you, and it'll bless you, of course. But the whole idea is this. The whole idea is if you are starting over, if you need a do-over in life, you need to start something from a brand new beginning. Maybe it could be in any area. It could be business. It could be academic. It could be in a relationship. It could be financial. It could be a number of areas. What we talked about was we have a tendency to basically, when something goes wrong, we have a tendency to rush back into something new. Instead of figuring out what went wrong, why it went wrong, what was wrong with our thinking, and we rush into it, and then what ends up happening is we repeat that same mistake over and over and over again, which only leads to more hurt, more heartache, more problems, and we're no better off for it. And so we want to make sure that we learn from our mistakes in the areas that matter most. And we talked about that as well. We tend to learn from the areas where we make mistakes in areas that matter the least when it comes to things like resetting your iPhone and silly things like that. You know what to do now because you've made the mistake and you know how to fix it, or you know how to text. And back in the day, my parents, it was a headache trying to teach them how to text a picture. How do you text a picture, Josh? I was like, listen, do I really have to drive to your house to show you how to text a picture? Yes, you do. But see, they learn from that. Why is it that we don't learn in the areas that matter the most? Those are the areas that we tend to repeat mistakes in. The areas that really matter when it comes to relationships and finances and our spiritual growth and all kinds of important things in life. Parenting, marriages, we could go on and on and on. So we said there were three reasons why we tend to not learn and why we tend to repeat mistakes. And there were three reasons we're going to go over these. I'm going to review pretty quick so that way you're at least caught up enough to where we can continue tonight. The three reasons were, we called them three myths. The first myth was the experience myth, and that was, well, experience makes me wiser. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. Experience in itself doesn't just make you wiser. Experience makes you, if you were here, anybody remember, makes you older. That's what experience does. It makes you older. You go through something, but it doesn't necessarily make you wiser. And we talked about what makes you wiser is evaluated experience. Evaluated experience makes you wiser. When you evaluate what you've gone through and you figure out why and figure out what and you ask God to help and you discern, that's what gives you true wisdom. Another myth was the know better, do better myth. We talked about that for a bit, and that is, well, now that I know better, I'll definitely do better. No, that's a myth because so many people already know better. You've gone through the same thing over and over and over again, and you still don't do better. You definitely know better, but it doesn't mean that you automatically do better. Just because you know better doesn't mean that you have all of a sudden the willpower. It doesn't mean that you all of a sudden have the discipline to do better. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have the character or the strength to do better. It doesn't mean any of that. I know better than eating a bag of hot fries before I go to bed, 11 o'clock p.m. I know I should not eat that bag of hot fries, but they're so tasty. And so do I do it? Yeah, absolutely. Even though I know better, it doesn't mean you automatically do it. We've all known better and simply done it anyway. We've all got our examples. The third myth, the time myth, and that is, I really need to jump back in the game. I've got to get started. I'm wasting time. I'm losing time. I've already gone through this. I've already gone through the pain. All my friends, they're moving forward. All my family's moving forward. Everybody's moving, and I'm just stuck here. I'm just standing here. Josh, you don't understand what I've been through. I need to get back in it. And we talked about the truth is this, that time is not your enemy. Time is your friend. We also talked about how critical it is from where you go through that situation or go through that pain or go through that issue or go through that problem, and from the time you go from that until you start something new, that time in between is so critical. It's so critical for you to develop the skill you need in order to not repeat the same mistake again. In order to not get hurt by the same person the same way again, so that you can learn. God's best for you is not that you go through life making the same mistakes over and over and over again. God gave us wisdom. He gave us a brain. He gave us a heart. He gave us prayer. There's so many reasons, so many ways that we should not and we should be able to avoid from making and not make the same mistakes again. And so we talked about time is your friend. We talked about how harmful it is to jump right back into something, especially if you've really been hurt, especially if you've really been burned, especially if somebody really did you wrong. Even though everybody's moving forward, if you're still hurting, you need to learn lessons from the past. in order to make sure that the next time is better than the last time. We also talked about there were 3 things you needed to do to ensure that next time is better than the last time. We talked about 2 already, and tonight we're going to cover the 3rd and final, but we'll quickly go over the first 2 just so you know. The first one we said was you've got to own it. That means you've got to own your piece of whatever the responsibility is, whatever was your fault. And I get it that most of the time it's 95% somebody else's fault. You didn't have much to do with it. It was all their fault. It was all what they said. It was all what all how they treated you. You know, it was that teacher, Pastor Josh. It was that teacher. Nobody likes that teacher anyway, and that's why I didn't do well in the class. Or you don't know my spouse is selfish. They're a jerk. Or you don't know my boss he's really rude and mean, and he deserved what I said and whatever. But everybody's unfair. My parents, they're stuck back in the 60s, so they just don't get me. There's so many excuses that we could come up with, and that's the one thing that we're good with. But we said regardless of where you're at, regardless of where you're having to start over and what you've gone through, part of it was your fault. And you've got to own your part. If you're 18 or older, you have a part in this, all right? If you're 17 and under, then you're a kid, and I'm not worried about you. But if you're 18 and older and you are dealing with real-life issues, then part of it was your fault, and you've got to own it. The second part we covered last week, and that is you've got to rethink it. And that is this. Normally when we go through something, and especially if it's something that we realize was really dumb, that we shouldn't have probably been involved in, we always end up asking ourselves this question: what was I thinking? How many of you have asked yourself that question before when something dumb happened or something terrible? What was I thinking? Why did I do that? Why did I allow that person? What was I thinking by going there? What was I thinking by doing this? What was I thinking? And we ask ourselves this question a lot, but very rarely do we ever pause and stop long enough to really answer it and figure out, what was I thinking? What is going on in this mind? And the Bible places a lot of emphasis on renewing your mind according to the Word of God. You've got to be able, you owe it to yourself to answer that question: what was I thinking? What was going on? If you don't change the way you think, you're going to make the same mistakes that you did before. You're going to do the same things you did before. So it requires a mindset change. And if you remember, if you were here, I challenged you to not be a conformer, but to be a transformer. How many of you remember I had the Transformers and do you remember that? I was surprised, by the way, at the number of people who were all pumped and fired up over using those Transformers. When I showed them, I was also surprised at the number of people who knew the name of the Transformers. After church, that's what everybody talked about. I was like, did you listen to anything I said? And they're like, no, we love the Transformers. God knows, all right? So tonight, I'm really excited. We're going to wrap this up, and we're going to talk about the third part, and that is release it. Release it. And here's what I mean by that. In the first week, we used a pie chart. We'll put a pie chart up on the screen. And what we did is we called it the circle of blame, that pie chart. All of that white part represents the blame. It represents why you went through that no good, somebody did this to me. You don't understand. That's my story. This is my sympathy part. It's my sad story. All of that white part represents. That is all of the horrible things that you went through, why you went through it, who they did it, whoever it was did it to you. All of that, that's what that represents is by that white part in that pie chart. Why it didn't turn out right, why the semester didn't work out, why you got let go from the job, why the first marriage didn't work, why your kids aren't with you anymore, why. That's all of the part. Why the money got wasted away. We could go on and on and on about what that represents, but that's what it is. Whatever the blame is, here it is. All right, and we discussed in most cases, that our slice of the pie, our slice of the blame is typically that little red slice, about 5% or so. Not a whole lot of it, but it's our part. It's that 5% part that is our part, our fault, our blame, what we did wrong, what we shouldn't have done right. And what we discussed was, in order for you to move forward, it is required, it's a requirement that you own your part. You've got to own your part, because if you live in a denial that you're the victim no matter what you go through, that everything that happens to you, and you're never at fault, and you're never the reason why, and you don't own any of it, then what you do, and you may not even realize it, but you end up smuggling all of the issues, all of the problems, all of the insecurities, all of the mess that helped lead to that destruction, that helped lead to that problem. You smuggle that all from your past into your future. And some of us don't even realize that we're doing that. But that's what's happening. That's what's going on when you refuse to own it. When you refuse to own your part, even if it's 2%, even if it's 3%, even if it's a little bit more, if it's 10%. But when you refuse to own your responsibility of it, then there's this form of denial in there. And then we end up being the sympathy victim everywhere we go. We have to share our sad story. Everybody's, that's what we want. That's what goes on. And so you don't want to carry your dysfunction. You don't want to carry your bad habits. You don't want to carry all of the problems and emotions from the previous horrible situation into the next one. And so you've got to start by owning your part of the piece of the pie, all right? And what I'm talking about tonight when I say release it is the rest of the pie. Let's flip it. It's the rest of it. So now what we're going to be talking about, and some of us were really hurt. Some of us really did go through terrible situations. Some of us really were abused. Some of us, it really was their fault, or they really did betray you, or they really did lie about you, or they really did go behind your back, and they really did do these things to you. And so this is the time where the promises were broken. And that red now, that's going to represent all of that mess. It's going to represent all of those issues where they played a huge part, and now you really do need a do-over. You really do. I need a fresh start. I need to start fresh, and maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a business, but the thing is this, and even though they are to blame, and even though that red, that's a lot of blame, that's a lot of hurt that maybe that somebody caused you, or that's a lot of, areas of loss, or a lot of struggle, or a lot of pain that somebody's caused you. But here's the truth of the responsibilities, that no matter how much they are to blame, you and I, we still have a responsibility in terms of what I do with this big part, how I handle this big part, right? Just like not owning your small slice of that pie, not owning your own little piece of that responsibility before smuggles your issues into your future, by ignoring, maybe sneaking your insecurities, or maybe by ignoring the red part, that allows somebody else to smuggle their issues, their problems, their insecurities, their dysfunction into your future. So when you don't own it for your part, you bring your mess in. But when you don't acknowledge their part and what they've done and what they hurt and how they treated and what they said and what they lied and what they did, when you don't acknowledge that and you don't handle that correctly, then you allow how they've done, what they've done to you, to affect your future as well. It's really important, all right? And listen, not dealing with this is a big mistake, because if you don't deal with the part that was done to you, if you don't deal with the part that was done to you, the betrayal, the hurt, the anger, whatever it was caused or as a result of the hurt, if you don't deal with that properly, here's what happens, all right? The people that you dislike the most, the people that you don't want to be around, the people that you never want to see again, the people that you would really rather not interact with, the people that you really don't care to see, the people that you really can't stand to accidentally run into because of what's happened in the past or whatever they said, or they betrayed you and you can't believe they did what they did, you can't believe they said what they said, you can't believe they treated you that way, or whatever it may be. Those people, you allow them to smuggle, or you empower them to bring their issues into your future. You don't even realize this is going on. You don't even realize what's going on. And I know this about you, and I know this about me. You don't want that. You don't want the way somebody else treated you, and that hurt and that pain and that problem and that dysfunction. You don't want that affecting your future like I don't. You do not want that in your life. And this is why so many people will make the same mistake, especially when they'll start over and then they'll repeat the mistake again. They'll start over fresh, new relationship, same problem. New job, same issues. Over and over and over again, they make the same mistakes over and over again, because what they're doing is everywhere they go, they're dragging that past behind them. Never letting go of what God wants them and embracing what God wants them for them in their future. Never letting go of what they have gone through in their past. Never letting go of the struggles and the issues and the pain and the problems. They're bringing it right in to their future. Or they refuse to deal with the hurt, or they refuse to deal with the anger, or they refuse to deal with all that comes from those issues, or as a result of being betrayed or being talked about or being abandoned or being abused or being mistreated or whatever it may be. So what I'm going to do tonight, and we're going to get to that scripture, I promise you. I'm going to break that down. We may even use some Greek tonight, all right? I'm going to ask you a very intrusive question. This is a very intrusive question, and it's probably going to offend you in some way, but it's one of those questions, and maybe not, I don't know, I don't want to assume that, but it's one of those questions that it requires and demands an emotional response, especially if you've gone through something. I don't mean to drag up all these emotions in church. If you've gone through something really tragic or something terrible here lately in your life, but it's a question that is meant to elicit a response in church. Even it's where we're at. And the reason why I ask these questions a lot whenever I preach is because I sincerely care. I don't want you leaving this service. If you're here tonight and you've gone through something, I don't want you leaving without some kind of hope. And I don't believe that everything gets fixed in one night. Normally that's not how it works, but I know that you need hope. And so I care. I know that God cares, and he doesn't want you going through the same mistakes and going through the same problems again. And so this is why I ask these questions and why I want to make sure that next time is better than last time. And so here's the question. We'll put it on the screen. How far into your future do you intend to carry the angst from the past? That word angst is a weird word. I get it. It's not a word we use that often. It's not like I use the word angst. I don't know that I've ever texted that word either. Angst. And what that word, it's just a word, and it kind of covered everything. Fear, anxiety, worry, pressure. It really just kind of covered it all. And so that's why I wanted to use this word. How far into the future do you really intend to carry the problems, the fear, the pressure, the anxiety, the anger from the past? I don't really have any plans. I haven't really thought of it. Well, it's an important question, because if you don't plan, if you don't have a plan to intentionally change and drop it, you're going to, by default, carry it with you. A lot of us just assume it'll go away, and it doesn't. It doesn't go away. It doesn't just disappear. All of the problems and the issues and what you've gone through. And listen, a lot of you saw this with your parents. Remember that time, some of you, you'll relate to this. Remember when your dad finally sat down, maybe there were problems with your parents, and maybe your dad finally sat you down, or your mom finally sat you down, and your dad says, hey, listen, son, or hey, listen, here's the deal with mom. She has this problem because her mom had this problem, and her mom before her had this problem, and it goes all the way back to Eve, so we just got to deal with it. You know what I'm talking about. Some of you remember, maybe it was your mom and sat down and said, listen, here's the deal with Dad. He was raised this way, and that's why he is the way he is, and that's why he's going to do the way he's going to do. That's why he's going to say what you all remember that. Some of you had those conversations with you, and we're all so great at coming up with excuses on why we should blame everybody else and why we should, this is not new information for us. This is stuff that we know, but this is the question, and I get it. I get it that you are who you are, and we all have our own issues, and this is who I am, and this is because of I was raised this way, or I was raised that way, or because of the way I was treated, or because of my experience in my past, or what I've gone through that shaped me, that's molded me. That's why I am the way I am, and I understand it. And we get that. But here's how this is all connected. How long do you plan on staying that way? Have you thought about that? Probably not. How long do you intend to carry the angst from the past into your future? Or another way we could put it is this way. How long do you intend to allow the people who hurt you? How long do you intend to allow the people who hurt you to continue to influence the way you live your life? How long the people who betrayed you, the people who mistreated you, the people who let you go for no reason, the people who were wrong, and the people, how long do you intend to allow those people to continue to influence your future? How long is it? All right? You say, I don't know. Well, let's break out the calendar. A week, a month, a day, 10 years, 20 years, the rest of your life? How long? Seriously, I'm being completely sincere about this. How long do you intend to allow someone to continue to control your future because of what you've gone through, because of the way they treated you, because of what went on? You say, I don't know. You got to think about this. You have to think about this, and I'm convinced that more people are passionate or are consumed with their own sad story than they are about finding true peace and freedom. I'm convinced of that because we love to share our sad stories. We've talked about this over the past couple of weeks. We love to share our sad stories because when I put that pie chart up, that's what that represents. All of that red, that's my sad story, that's your sad story. We can get together and we can have a big Kleenex party and we can cry over each other's whatever, because you don't know what I went through, and it's so terrible, and he did this, and she did this, and then you share your sad story, and next thing you know, we're all just both sad, and, you get gift cards because everybody's so sad, and everybody feels bad for you, and then you keep telling everybody, and you go on Facebook, and nobody knows what I've gone through, and it's like 600 pages long of all the stuff you've gone through, and you get 35 likes, so now you're excited about that. But here's the adult, I really want Christ to set me free question. How long will you allow the people that you don't even like to influence you? How long will you allow the people who did you wrong to influence your future? How long will you do that? How long will we put up with that? Now, I think that if we were to be brutally honest, or we were to answer this question, we would respond in a way, we would say today. I mean, that's what my answer would be is, if I'm going through something difficult, how much longer, Josh, are you willing to deal with this? Are you willing to put up with this? I don't want to put up with it anymore, another moment. I don't want to deal with it another day. Today I want freedom. Today I want breakthrough. Today I want God's best for my life. I don't want to empower those people who aren't even around anymore. I don't want to empower those people, the people who mistreated me. I don't want to empower that spouse or that ex who hurt me and doesn't care about me. I don't want to empower that boss. I don't want to empower my 11th grade teacher who made me stand up in front of the class because I did something wrong and made everybody laugh, and I was embarrassed and humiliated, and that stuck with me, and it changed the way I am with around people, and now I have social issues because of that. I don't know whatever your problem is. It could be anything, but a lot of people have deep issues because of so many different reasons, but whatever it is, you don't want to allow that person or that situation to be empowered to affect your future any longer. How long are you willing to put up with it? So many people are willing to put up with it so much longer. All right, here's how this connects. All right, here's how this connects to I want my next time to be better than my last time. I want the next time I'm going through the next job, the next relationship, whatever it is I've got to start over, whatever it is I got to do over. I want it to be better. Here's where this connects. All right, and this is another question. This one's way easier. Have you ever met anyone that really seemed to have their life together? All right, I'm talking wrinkle-free life. You're talking to this person, you see them, and you're thinking, man, they live the normal life. Maybe you watched them grow up. Maybe you're older and you watched them grow up, and they went to school, and then they got out of school. They went to college. When they went to after college, they got in a relationship. Then they got married, and they got a job, and then they have kids, and everything just seemed to go like a typical life would go. And when you see these people and you watch their lives, you're thinking, man, that person right there, I wish I had that life. And how many of you know someone like that? You've seen the wrinkle-free life. Or we all know somebody like that. We've all seen somebody like that. How many of you, when you talk to this person, you start to get to know them, and then they start to unravel or share a bit of their story. And in their story, you learn of something that completely shocks you. Something horrible that they had to endure in their childhood or in their past, or a struggle that they've gone through in their life. And you look at these people and you think, man, there is not a person on this planet who would have ever thought that you went through that. I would have never guessed in 100 years, I would have never guessed that you had to go through that. I would have never guessed that somebody did that to you. I would have never guessed that you lost that. I would have never guessed that you struggled through that. You see these people and you assume that they've got this wrinkle-free life and that they've got this life that everything always works out, and then you talk to them and you find out that they went through something really complicated, really difficult, really, really hard. And then now you're looking at them and you're thinking, there is absolutely no evidence that you went through any of that. Well, see, when I meet these people and when I see them, that's the goal. That's the goal for me. That's the goal for you. That's the goal. It's not that they stop sharing their story. Of course, they're sharing their story and they're testifying for the goodness of God. But what they're doing is they have let go of the past. Now, because I'm a pastor, this is what I do. I don't accept whenever I'm talking to somebody and they're giving me their story, and I'm hearing it maybe for the first time, and they'll get to that point in their story, because I'm just like you. I'm looking at people thinking, man, that guy, they've just had it all together. It's worked out for them. And then when I hear this part of their story that shocks me, they're telling me what they had to go through. I always stop them, and I always say, hold on a second. We need to stop right there, because how did you get through that? What made you get through? How did you go through that? What did you do? Because I need to know that. Now, almost 100% of the time, I'd say 100% of the time, when I ask somebody that question about what they went through and make them think about how they got through it, they almost unanimously say, 100% respond with a phrase that sounds something like, well, there was a point where I decided. There was a point where I decided enough was enough. There was a point where I decided I wasn't going to allow this to change. There was a point where I decided. There was a moment where I was sitting there and it was hurting and there was problems, but I decided. And then every single one, there is this moment where they say, I decided. Here's what happened, and then I decided. At some point, they decided this. Put this on the screen. My past will remind me, but it will not define me. Every single one of them, at some point, maybe they didn't say it this way, but they say it in a way, at some point, I decided my past will remind me. I can't forget it. I can't change it. I can't go back. Can't get to do that past over. But it will remind me, but it will not define me. I will not be defined by my hurt. I will not be defined by being betrayed. I will not be defined by being lied about. And now I feel like a victim everywhere I go. I will not be defined by that. Every single one of them. They say, I learned from my past. And this is, a lot of them would say, I didn't want to parent the way I was parented. I love my parents, but they didn't do things, and I learned because I didn't want to do that. Or they'll say, I don't want my second marriage to be like my first marriage. I need this one to work. And so I decided that I'm going to learn from the past. I'm not going to live in the past. Or a lot of them will say, I wanted my job, or I wanted to spend money, or they'll say so many different things, but I wanted my life to be different. I decided that my past will not define me. And here's what you've got to know. You have the ability. You and I, we each have the ability to decide to leave the past behind us. Every single one of us do. You have the ability. I have the ability to choose to let the past go. And I have met enough people. You've met enough people. Some of you are those people that regardless of the things and the stuff from the past where you've gone through that deeply affected you, you have the ability through God, through the Holy Spirit, through the Word of God, through prayer, you have the ability to do something about it. You do. You have the ability to move forward no matter how severe, no matter how bad. There's a certain point where you have to decide, I'm going to leave that behind. If I'm going to start over, if I'm going to have a do-over, I don't want to go through this again. I've got to let go. I've got to move forward. Again, how long do you intend to allow the past to influence your future? That's a really serious question. Until you answer that question, until you develop the skills that we've been talking about in this series, the right thinking to move forward, next time, I'm sad to say, next time it's going to look an awful lot like last time. The next relationship, the next opportunity, the next job, the next whatever it may be, fill in the blank. You've got to release the past in order for the past to release you. You have to. You have to release the past. And this all boils down to one single word, and it's a word that we use in church quite a bit. It's a word that you've heard, I use a lot, you use a lot, and sometimes I think we get confused over how this is actually applied. But this word is forgive. This word is forgiveness. Forgiveness, it allows us to leverage the lessons of the past without carrying all the luggage from the past into the future. Remember, the past is going to remind you, but it's not going to define you. And again, none of this is new. This is stuff that if you've been at New Life here more than a bit, you're going to know this, and you're going to have heard this before. And my hope and my prayer for somebody is that there's someone listening to this message who is maybe struggling with the thought that I'm always going to be defined by what my struggle is. I'm always going to be defined by my addiction. I'm always going to be defined by my broken marriage. I'm always going to be defined by my abuse. I'm always going to be defined by my problems. I see and hear this so often from so many different people where they never break out. And maybe this isn't for everybody, but it's for that one person. It's for the one person who doesn't think that they'll ever break free. And I'm here to tell you that you will break free, and that you are the one who has to decide. I wish that I could decide for you, but I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. You have to decide that you'll be reminded of your past, but not defined by your past. And maybe you don't decide tonight. I'm a realistic pastor. I'm not one of those guys who believe that you're going to hear a message. This has been an amazing series, powerful series. It'll change your life instantly. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm serious when I say this and sincere when I say this. I'm not one of those guys who believe that, well, you heard the message, we prayed, everything's good, walk out, life is good, everything worked out. No, and maybe you don't decide instantly. Maybe it takes some time. Maybe you have some things and you have some stuff that you've got to work through. But I do know this, that if you allow God, if that seed from the Word of God is sown into your heart, it will produce. It will transform. It will heal. It will bring you freedom. It will bring you breakthrough in time. But you've got to allow God, you've got to honor Him with the faith to make a choice. To make a choice. We're getting into Ephesians 4. We're going to take a few minutes and break this down. Apostle Paul, we've talked about Apostle Paul a few times over this series. Apostle Paul, remember, he hated Christians. I won't go over this too much, but he hated Christians. In fact, he had them killed and he had them arrested. So if you want to arrest Christians, maybe this is a book that you read, Apostle Paul's book, all right? But he hated Christians, and then he became one. And after he became one, he started writing letters to Christians, and he started encouraging them and helping them and teaching them, and he ended up writing what 2/3 of the New Testament. It all came from the Apostle Paul. And one of the letters he wrote was a letter to the Ephesians, the church of Ephesus. And in the church of Ephesus, he gives them some amazing insight on what true forgiveness is and what it really means to have a freedom from the past. And so I want to start by looking at Ephesians chapter 4, and we'll look in verses 26, and we're going to break these down a little bit. And it's going to be amazing, and it's going to help you, and it's going to encourage you. So looking in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, starts with this: in your anger, do not sin. Be angry and don't sin. A lot of you, that's what your translations will say. If you remember, you've been at church a long time, the King James will say, be angry and sin not, and you remember that. Now, in the Greek, there are actually two imperatives here. In other words, there are 2 points to this. There are actually 2 separate actions that the Apostle Paul is trying to relay, and he's trying to make sure we understand. One is this: it is be angry. In other words, Paul's saying it's okay to be angry. You're like, sweet, I'm good at that. He's telling us, listen, there are things in life that you should get angry about. Some things in life that you should be angry for. He says there are things in life that should actually, hurt makes me angry. When people get hurt, I get angry at that. When people hurt me, I get really angry at that. When people hurt my wife, I'm going to punch you in the face. He says that there are some things in life that should cause you to be angry, and we all know what causes, right? It's easy to know what causes us to be angry: when people hurt us, when promises get broken, when somebody does something wrong to you, when you don't get what you want, when you want how you want it. That makes you angry, all right? The Apostle Paul says there are things that should happen that make you angry. We're emotional people. God made these emotions. God understands these emotions, and the anger emotion is in us. So the Apostle Paul says, listen, it's okay. Be angry. There are some things in life that should make you angry, and some of the reasons. I said, there are some things that should make you angry that don't make you angry. Some of you, I'd like you to get a little angry. Get a little life out of you. Get a little, some of you, your spouse is trying to make you angry, and you're just sitting there not doing anything, not responding, not, showing any emotion. Well, get angry at something, all right? But the Apostle Paul, he starts to draw a difference between being angry and sinning. Being angry and responding in anger with sin and wrong responses and hard and cruel and rude responses. And he starts to draw a line there. And so he's wanting us to know that there's a difference, all right? You getting angry at things that hurt others and things that are wrong is one thing, but you getting angry because your waitress didn't bring you your drink fast enough and you're super thirsty because you've been eating this food and somebody better bring me my drink right now, that's not good anger. So the Apostle Paul is starting to draw the line between good anger, bad anger. There's a time and there's a place for anger, but keep it in its proper place. So he gives us these 2 imperatives. The first one is be angry. The second one, don't sin. The first one is really, really easy. He says, be angry and do not sin. And then he starts to give us some insight about our responsibility and how anger is associated with the past. And so look in verse 27. Verse 27. He says, be angry, do not sin. And then let's finish the last part of verse 26. And do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Be angry and don't sin. And now he says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. And then what I like this, and I highlighted here, do not. In other words, you have to decide. He's not saying that God's going to automatically make you and going to bless you with the no anger gene. Okay? But he's saying you decide. Do not be angry. Do not let the sun go down. And listen, a lot of us take this literally where we say, do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And a lot of us take this literally and we'll say, don't go to bed angry. How many of you have heard that before? I don't want to go to bed angry. And that's a good rule in the house. And that's something you should do. But that's easy to do when it's over something silly like your husband shaving at the sink and all of his man hair is everywhere and he doesn't clean it up and it makes you mad, makes you gross, all right? Or your wife uses your razor and you go to use it and shave your face and now you look like a cat ninja chopped you or whatever it may be, all right? It's easy whenever it's little things. And because, you apologize. I'm so sorry, honey. I'm so sorry, sweetie. Good night. We're not mad. We go to bed. We're not angry, all right? But when it's really big, bad things, really serious, big, bad things, this isn't literal. Paul's not saying, all right, over the worst of the worst in life, you have to make sure that you're over it in less than 24 hours. He's not saying that, because Paul is also very practical and he's also very understanding in this as well. And what he's communicating is this. He's saying at some point, remember, you have the responsibility. Do not let. In other words, you don't do this. You have to decide. You have the responsibility. He said at some point you have to understand you've got to decide how many more days will I allow this to consume me? How many more sunsets? How many more days? How many more times? How many more? Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be a month? How much longer am I going to allow this anger to consume me? How much longer am I going to allow this to hurt me, to destroy me? And this is where it starts to get brilliant here. All right, Ephesians, keep looking, verses 27. He says, and do not, again, there it is, that do not, you have a choice, you've got to decide, do not give the devil a foothold. Do not give or do not grant or do not allow or do not gift the devil a foothold. You have the responsibility. It's your choice. It's your decision. And I know it's tough. And again, you tell me your story, I'll tell you mine. We can be sad, we can cry together, and we can stay there, and we can never grow, and we can never go forward, and we can never heal up. And I know it's horrible. And if I'm being honest, as a pastor, I've heard some really horrible things. And there are some of you that I because of compassion, when I hear what you've gone through, I think, well, if anybody deserves to stay mad, it's you. I think that you get a pass. You get a get out of jail free, or you get a whatever it is card you need, because you've gone through something pretty terrible. And sometimes I think that in my heart, but it's not, and I would never feel like I have the moral authority to tell you how to handle some of the situations that some of you have gone through. Some people have gone through some really horrible things, and I'm not trying to downplay that, and I know it's dark, but the Apostle Paul, he covers it right here. And I want to come back to the word devil in a moment, but first I want to talk about this word foothold, because figuratively it means opportunity. But literally it means a staging area. In other words, don't allow the devil to set up shop in your life. Don't allow the enemy any ground in your life. Don't allow the enemy to come in. Don't give him an opportunity. Don't allow your anger to now result in the enemy influencing your future. It's a powerful, powerful word here. He says, listen, don't allow your anger or your resentment or your hurts or your problems to allow the devil now a stronghold or a foothold that changes your future forever. He says, don't allow it. You have to decide, well, how do we keep that from happening? It's by deciding. It's by choosing. It's by deciding. Only 4 more days. I'm going to break through this. I'm not going to allow it in my life. Maybe it's a 1 more week. I'm only going to allow this 1 more week, and then I'm going to do something about it. Or I'm going to give it 1 more month, or maybe by the end of 2014, when January 1, 2015 hits, I'm going to be free from that mess because I choose to no longer allow that problem, that mess, that person, whoever, whatever it may be, to destroy and determine and dictate my future any longer. There will be no more influence from my past. It's not going to happen. You have to decide that. The Apostle Paul is making this very, very clear. I refuse to allow the enemy any staging ground, any opportunity that reaches into my future, that messes with my marriage, how I treat my wife, that messes with my kids, how I parent, that reaches at my job and my career, that reaches into my ministry and how I treat people, that reaches in my... But see, that's what we've been doing. We've been allowing the past, the people who hurt us, to reach into our future and steal and hurt and destroy, instead of deciding to say that's enough. Looking at the word the devil, I wanted to talk about that word also. Focus on the devil. Anybody talk about the devil, everybody gets a little tense. All right. In the Greek translation, by the way, there's actually a word that's used for the name Satan, and it's used throughout the New Testament, throughout the Old, where there's an actual Greek word for the word Satan, and that is not the word that is used in this translation. Whenever you read this, you read it in the original, that the Apostle Paul doesn't use this. He uses a Greek word that when you look at the definition, it really means deceiver. It really means liar, deceptive one. And that's what he's using in this passage. And there are actually some really old translations that use the word liar, some old Bible translations. And here's what's interesting, because whenever whenever we use the word devil, or like, I don't know, I can talk about me. Whenever I use the word or read the word devil, my imagination kicks in, and all of a sudden I'm seeing the red guy in the cape with the horns, and he's sitting on my shoulder, and he's like, and that's what I start to think. I'm an idiot in some ways, and so that's what I think whenever we read the word devil. I'm thinking, right, well, the devil's there, and he's trying to influence me to do the bad stuff. But here's where I want to get to. What if you take out the word devil? You take out the word devil, and you, in that blank, put in whoever it was who hurt you. Maybe Frank. Frank hurt me. I don't know. Put that on the screen. And do not give the blank a foothold, or do not give whoever it may be a foothold. Do not give your boss a foothold. Do not give your teacher. And I'm not calling them the devil, right? That's not what I'm trying to say, but I'm just saying they were the ones who hurt you. They were the ones who deceived you. They were the ones who lied about you. And this begins to help you understand what Paul is trying to accomplish through this verse here. He's trying to help you see that, listen, this is the truth. That person who hurt you, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was an ex, maybe whoever. Do not allow that person a foothold in your life. And here's what I know about you. I know this. You don't want to give the person who hurt you the most in your life, you don't want to give the person who did the most wrong in your life a staging ground to your heart. I know that. You don't want to give someone who has caused that much damage a big place in your future. The Apostle Paul is covering that. He's saying, listen, there's some of us, that's been happening and occurring. And so when we start to repeat these mistakes, sometimes we'll overact, sometimes we'll underreact, but we're not responding the way that we should, and we live confused, and we live emotionally unstable, and we live unsure. And the Apostle Paul understands this, and he's saying, listen, there have been too many sunsets on stuff that you have allowed to happen, stuff that you have not dealt with. There have been too many days go on, and that's why he's saying, don't give one more day. Don't allow one more day to go by where you don't confront your past, and you don't decide to move forward. Where you say, I've had enough, I'll no longer be defined by my past. He's covering, he's very, very stern with this. And he's saying, listen, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but it's saying you have to decide. At some point, you have got to decide that whatever it takes, I will be free. To ensure that next time is better than last time, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to serve. I'm going to give. I'm going to be at church all the time. I'm going to get in the Word of God. I'm going to pray. I'm going to get around people who are godly and less around the people who are ungodly. I'm going to do whatever it takes, because freedom and peace is worth it. To be free from the past and the hurt is worth it. And a lot of us, we've allowed this to go on so long in our lives, it's already affected marriages, second marriages, third marriages. It's already affected the way we've treated people, the way we've lived our life, the way we've parented, the way it's already began that. But see, it's not too late. You can decide to put a stop to it. You can. Yes, you can. See, not only, and for, I got to keep going in the scripture, all right? I'm not going to be defined by my past, all right? I'm not going to give the deceiver a foothold. Remember, there's a place for anger, but you got to put it in its place, all right? Look, we're going to skip a few verses. Look in verse 31. Ephesians chapter 4, look at verse 31. Again, here we go. Get rid of, or in other words, decide. A lot of choice here, a lot of responsibility. Decide, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice, all right? In other words, if we're talking about forgiveness and moving forward and getting rid of this, forgiving here, what it means is it means to pardon. It means to pardon. Now, when I talk about the word pardon means this. It means you're guilty, but I'm going to let you off anyway. You did do me wrong, and we both know it. You did mistreat me, and we both know it. You were a jerk, and we both know it. But I'm going to let you off anyway. Pardon. That's what that means. It doesn't mean we ignore and everybody sobs and it's all. No, it just means I know what you did. You know what I did. I know what you did. But I'm going to let you off anyway. I'm going to move forward and I'm going to forgive you anyway. I am choosing to no longer persecute. I'm choosing to no longer prosecute you for what happened. And if you're a Christian, you have a responsibility. You have an absolute responsibility to pardon the people who have done you wrong. You do. People who have done you wrong, mistreated, said things, whatever it may be. As a Christian, you've got to do this because, listen, the Apostle Paul, he raises the bar. Look at the next verse. Verse 32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. There's that word forgiving, pardon. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. In other words, you and I, we were actually guilty. We were actually guilty. We deserved death. We deserved everything, the punishment that happened to us, that could happen to us. We deserved it all. But God actually pardoned us. He really forgave us. He really said, you know what, you are guilty. You do deserve this, but I love you anyway. And now he's telling us that that is our example. And that's why as a Christian, listen, we not only have the opportunity, but we have the responsibility. And this serves us very well as also to forgive and to move forward and to follow this teaching. Because listen, forgiveness ensures that the people who hurt us in the past no longer influence our future. That's what forgiveness does. It heals you. It breaks you free from that. So Paul says, I want you to pardon because you've been pardoned. And here's some wisdom to go along with that. How about you go first? It's not easy to be the first one to say, I apologize, is it? It's not, especially when you know you're right and they're wrong. And see, you have to decide that, do I want to be right? And we grow apart and I stay in pain and I live with this mess and this affects my future? Or do I want to be free? Or do I want peace? And you've got to decide that. And so my advice to everyone, it's always to be the first one. You be the first one. You be the first one to reach out. You be the first one to offer an apology. You be the first one to say, I'm sorry, I love you. It's a powerful thing to be the first one. You decide to forgive. You decide that your past is not going to define you. You decide to pardon. Now, if you're serious about this, I'm going to give you a really powerful first step, and I encourage you to do this right away. And that is this: make a list. Make a list of every single thing you believe that person who hurt you, every single thing that they owe you. Make a list. I want you, and listen, you're going to think, it'll be just a couple things, and you're going to take some time and start writing. And next thing you know, you're going to be sitting there for hours writing down all the things that they owe you, especially those of you who've gone through something bad, because you'll start writing down and it'll start by, they stole time, they stole marriage. I no longer get to tuck my kids in at night. I no longer get to. I no longer have this. I no longer have that. Next thing you know, this list is going to grow and going to grow and going to grow, and you're thinking, well, how is this helpful? Here's how it's helpful. Because in order for you to pardon and truly forgive somebody, you better be crystal clear on everything you're pardoning them for. You better absolutely know what you're forgiving them of. That way, when it is over, it is over. Nothing dragging, nothing lingering, nothing hanging, nothing from the back, nothing. You are free. So make your list. Start writing it down. I would take time, pray it out. You don't want to get angry while you're writing this, but it could be all kinds of things. Stole my opportunities. They stole my... I've heard a lot of people's lists over the years. And once you start, it'll be hard to stop because you're going to be thinking of new things. Man, I had no idea that they did all that to me. Write it down. You need to absolutely be crystal clear before you pardon them of the full picture. You need to know what it all is. You need to know what all happened. You've got to have a full understanding of it. So in order for you to move on. Again, this is something Paul... This is one of those things. Paul, there are times where if your wife and or your spouse, you have a little argument, you don't want to go to bed angry over something small, then great. That's great for that, about the sun going down. Don't let the sun go down in your wrath. But Paul wasn't being real literal when he was talking about some of the big things. But what he is saying is you have to, at some point, to decide that I'm not going to allow the enemy one more day, not one more foothold, not one more strong place in my life. At some point, you have to decide my future is in God's hands, not theirs. You have to decide this. Not me, not your spouse. And again, this has been a series that is built. We talked about the second week of you owning it. And listen, you'll never let go of their part until you first own your part. That's why that's so important. That's why we covered that first, because you've got to own your part of it first. You're not going to. You don't need to worry about theirs if you're still focused on yours. You've got to let go of yours. You've got to own what you took care of, and that's where you start. Otherwise, you'll just stay mad, and your anger will cause sin and cause problems, right? You've got to own your peace, and then you've got to rethink it. We talked about that. You've got to rethink it. You've got to allow God to transform. The only way you transform is through the renewing of your mind through this word. There is another way the Bible describes you to be transformed. You're not transformed by your commitment. You're not transformed by rededicating your life to Jesus 15 times a year. You're not transformed by any of that. The only way that you are transformed and your mind is changed, your thinking is changed, is by this word. That's it. And then you've got to release it. Whoever it is they did this, whatever they did, whoever did it to you, whatever it may be, listen, your past will remind you, but it will not define you. And you've got to choose to move on. I decide that today is the last day, that my future is influenced by my pain, by their problems, by what we went through. By doing these things, this will ensure that next time will be better than last time. Bow your head and close your eyes.